My name is Summer Parker, and I was 30 years old the night my family threw me a surprise birthday party that had nothing to do with me. Every balloon had my sister's name on it. Every photo on the wall was her face. The cake, 3 tiers, white fondant, gold lettering, read, "Congratulations, Brooke." And when I stood in the middle of that room full of people and quietly asked my mother why, she smiled at me the way you'd smile at a child who asked a stupid question. Then she said it, right there, in front of 47 guests. "Sweetheart, no one would come just for you." 47 people heard her. Not one of them said a word. I walked out alone. But what I didn't know, someone had recorded the whole thing. 3 years later, on Mother's Day, I showed her exactly what she said. Before I get into how, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly speaks to you. And I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. Now, to understand why that Mother's Day changed everything, I need to take you back to where it started. If you met the Parker family at a barbecue or a church fundraiser, you'd think we had it all figured out. My mother, Diane, was the kind of woman who never showed up anywhere without a casserole and a compliment. She ran the PTA. She organized the neighborhood block party every 4th of July. She volunteered at the women's shelter 2 Saturdays a month. People in our town called her Supermom, and she made sure they kept calling her that. My older sister Brooke was her masterpiece. 2 years older than me, effortlessly pretty, loud in all the right ways. Brooke got promoted to marketing director at 29, and my mother posted about it 4 times in 1 week. Every dinner party started the same way. "Have you met Brooke? She's doing incredible things." And then there was me. I graduated the same year Brooke did, same university, higher GPA. But if you walked into our living room and looked at the framed family photo on the wall, the one taken at graduation, you'd see Brooke front and center, cap and gown, my parents flanking her like bodyguards. I was at the edge, half my shoulder cut off by the frame. I used to think it was an accident, bad cropping, a careless choice at the print shop. Then one Thanksgiving, I was scrolling through my mother's phone looking for a recipe she'd saved, and I found the original photo. Full frame, both of us visible. She hadn't cropped me out by mistake. She'd chosen to. I set the phone down. I didn't say anything. That was always my role in the Parker family. The quiet one. The easy one. The one who never made a scene. And when you never make a scene, people start to forget you're even in the room. It wasn't just the photo. It was everything. Whenever guests came over, my mother would introduce us the same way. She'd put her hand on Brooke's shoulder and beam, "This is Brooke, my daughter. She's a marketing director." Then she'd half turn toward me, almost as an afterthought. "And this is Summer." No title, no detail, just a name, like a footnote at the bottom of a page no one reads. The Christmas before I turned 30, my mother gave Brooke a designer handbag. Tissue paper, ribbon, a handwritten card, 3 full paragraphs about how proud she was. I watched Brooke read it out loud at the table while my mother dabbed her eyes. My gift was a $50 gift card in a plain white envelope. No card. No note. Not even my name on the outside. My father saw it. I know he did because he looked at me, then looked away. "Your mom's been busy," he said quietly. "She didn't have time to shop properly." I nodded. I always nodded. I didn't hate Brooke for any of this. She didn't build this system. She just never questioned it. She never once looked at our mother and said, "Why is Summer's name not on the card?" She never asked because the answer might cost her something. And Brooke had never been asked to pay. I told myself it was fine. I told myself this was just how families worked. Some kids get the spotlight, some kids get the envelope. But there's a difference between accepting something and surviving it. I was surviving. And I thought I'd keep surviving forever, until the night of my 30th birthday. The night my mother decided to say out loud what she'd been whispering with every cropped photo and missing card for 30 years. 1 month before I turned 30, something happened that I still think about. My mother called me. Not a group text, not a tell Summer passed through Brooke. She called me directly. "I'm planning something special for your birthday," she said. Her voice was warm, almost tender. 30 is a big deal, sweetheart. We need to do it right." I sat on the edge of my bed and pressed the phone harder against my ear, like I was afraid the words would evaporate. My mother was planning something for me. Just for me. I went shopping that weekend. I found a navy dress. Fitted, elegant, the kind of thing I never bought for myself, because I never had an occasion that felt mine. I stood in the fitting room mirror and practiced smiling. Not because I didn't know how to smile, because I wasn't used to smiling at family events. I was used to standing in the corner, holding a plate, watching Brooke glow. I told a coworker about it on Monday. "My family's throwing me a party," I said, and the sentence felt foreign in my mouth. She said that was sweet. I agreed. I believed it. 2 days before the party, Brooke called. "Hey, what are you wearing? Mom said I should wear white." I didn't think anything of it. White was Brooke's color. She wore white to everything. It wasn't until much later, standing in that decorated room with her name on every surface, that I understood. Brooke wore white because our mother wanted her to stand out, like the leading lady in a film where I was never cast. But that night, walking out of the dress shop with my navy dress in a bag, I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I need to explain something before I tell you what happened at that party. I need you to understand what I was risking by staying quiet, and what I'd already lost. By the time I turned 30, I was doing well at work. I'd just been promoted to senior analyst at a financial consulting firm downtown. My boss respected me. My clients trusted me. In that office, I was someone. I had a name on a door, a voice in the room, and people who listened when I spoke. But the second I stepped into my parents' house, I shrank. I became 12 again. The girl who nodded, the girl who cleared the dishes, the girl who watched everyone else blow out the candles. And every year I stayed silent. My mother took a little more. I stayed silent when she cropped me out of the photo, so she stopped inviting me to family decisions. I stayed silent when she introduced me without a title, so she started forgetting to invite me to certain dinners. I stayed silent when the gift card came with no card, so she stopped pretending there was anything to say. Silence wasn't keeping the peace. Silence was erasing me. If I kept going like this, I knew where it ended. I'd become the daughter even my father forgot to call on Christmas. The name people vaguely remembered at reunions. Wait, Diane has 2 daughters? I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a speech. But somewhere inside me, the night before my 30th birthday, a small voice said, "This is the last time you let yourself hope without proof." I didn't know yet what kind of proof life was about to hand me, or how long it would take me to use it. I pulled up to my parents' house at 6:50, 10 minutes early. The driveway was already full. Cars lined both sides of the street. I counted, 47. I remember thinking, she really went all out. I smoothed my navy dress, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, took a breath, walked to the front door. The second I opened it, surprise! Confetti, music, a room packed with people. For one heartbeat, I believed it was for me. Then I saw the balloons, gold and white, floating in clusters from every corner, each one printed with the same word, Brooke. I turned to the left. A banner stretched across the living room wall. "Congratulations, Brooke Parker, VP of Marketing. We're so proud." I looked at the cake. 3 tiers, gold lettering. Brooke, in elegant cursive. Beneath it, the logo of her company. My stomach dropped. But my feet didn't move. A woman I half recognized walked up to me with a champagne glass. "You must be so proud of your sister. What an achievement." I nodded, smiled, said something like, "She's worked really hard." Then I noticed it. In the far corner of the dessert table, almost hidden behind a stack of napkins, a small cupcake, white frosting, a single letter piped on top in blue icing. S. Not summer, not happy birthday, just the letter S, like a checkbox. Like someone said, "We should probably put something out for her." And this was the minimum effort that qualified. I picked it up, looked at it, set it back down. 47 people were clapping, hugging, toasting my sister. And I stood there in my navy dress, holding nothing, wondering when I'd started confusing crumbs with a seat at the table. I gave it 20 minutes. I told myself, maybe there's a second part. Maybe the Brooke stuff is first, and then they'll bring out something for me. A toast, a song, anything. 20 minutes passed. No one mentioned my birthday, not once. I watched my mother work the room. She floated from group to group, glowing, laughing, one hand on Brooke's arm like a pageant coach showing off her winner. My father stood by the kitchen island, beer in hand, nodding at whatever someone was telling him about the stock market. He never looked my way. I found my mother alone by the drink station. I walked over, kept my voice low, steady. "Mom, this party, I thought it was for me?" She looked at me, still smiling. "Of course it's for you, sweetheart. It's just, I figured if we combined it with Brooke's celebration, more people would show up. You understand, right? But nothing here is for me. My name isn't on the cake, not on the banner, not on the balloons." Her smile tightened. She leaned in, but her voice didn't drop enough. "Summer, please don't make this difficult. Not in front of guests." I should have stopped. Every instinct built over 30 years told me to nod, smile, and walk back to my corner. But something in me, maybe the navy dress, maybe the cupcake with a single letter, maybe 30 years of swallowed words, wouldn't let me. "Mom, why?" One word. 3 letters. The most dangerous question I'd ever asked. She put her glass down on the table, looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't whisper. She didn't deflect. She didn't pretend. She answered. My mother looked at me the way you'd look at someone stating the obvious. She tilted her head. She smiled. A real smile, not a nervous one. And she said it like she was telling me the weather. "Sweetheart, no one would come just for you." She didn't whisper. She didn't flinch. She said it at full volume in a room where the music had just dipped between songs, and every word carried. 47 people heard it. I know because I looked. I turned my head and scanned the room the way you do when you're trying to find one person willing to meet your eyes. Not one. 2 women near the window glanced at each other, then looked down at their plates. A man by the fireplace cleared his throat and took a long drink. My father stood at the far end of the kitchen, beer in hand, staring out the window at the backyard like something fascinating was happening in the dark. Brooke was 3 steps away. She heard every syllable. She let out a short laugh, the kind that's more reflex than joy, and turned to the woman beside her. "My mom's just kidding." No one corrected her. No one corrected my mother. The room just absorbed it, like it wasn't new information, like they'd always known, and were only uncomfortable because someone finally said it out loud. I set my glass of orange juice on the table. I picked up my purse from the chair by the door. I walked across the living room, through the foyer, and out the front door. My heels clicked on the hardwood. That was the loudest sound in the room. No one followed. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could turn the key. My hands were shaking, but my eyes were dry. I hadn't cried. I wouldn't. Not there. Not for them. I drove home in the dark with the radio off. I know some of you watching this right now are thinking, I've been in that room. I know what that silence sounds like. If that's you, if you've ever been made invisible by the people who were supposed to see you first, drop a broken heart in the comments and tell me, do you think Summer should have stayed and fought? Or was she right to walk out? I want to hear your answer. Now, let me tell you what happened at 2 in the morning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my apartment staring at the ceiling, still in my navy dress, shoes kicked off by the front door. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that reminds you no one is coming. At 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Uncle Frank. My mother's older brother. He called maybe twice a year, birthdays and Thanksgiving. Never at 2 a.m. I almost didn't answer, but something about the hour made me pick up. "Summer." His voice was low, tired. "Did you get home safe?" "Yeah." A pause. I heard him exhale. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have said something tonight. I should have stood up. I didn't, and I'm ashamed of that." I closed my eyes. Uncle Frank had known my mother his whole life. He understood who Diane was, the performance, the image, the need to control every narrative. He'd made peace with it decades ago by keeping his distance, choosing family dinners over family fights. "It's okay," I said. I didn't mean it. But I said it because that's what I'd been trained to say. "No, it's not." His voice cracked, just barely. "You deserved better tonight. You've always deserved better. And if you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me." I thanked him. We hung up. I didn't know it then, but that phone call mattered more than I could have imagined. Not because of what Frank said, but because of what it set into motion months later. Frank had a daughter. Her name was Natalie. She was 27, sharp-eyed, and she'd been in that room tonight, and she'd seen everything. I just didn't know yet how much everything she had actually captured. In the weeks after my birthday, I did what I'd always done when things got heavy. I went quiet. Not the performative kind, the survival kind. I stopped answering group texts. Didn't show up to Thanksgiving. Didn't call for Christmas. I didn't block anyone. I just stopped reaching, and I waited to see who would reach back. My mother didn't call. Not once. Brooke sent one text, 3 weeks after the party. Mom says you're being overly sensitive. Hope you're okay. I read it. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who watched me get gutted in public and sent a wellness check through the person who held the knife. My father? Nothing. Radio silence. I told myself he was stuck, that he wanted to call but didn't know how. That was easier than admitting he might simply not have tried. But then Natalie called. She didn't start with, "Are you okay?" or "How are you holding up?" She said, "Summer, that night at the party, after you left, do you want to know what happened?" I said no, not yet. I wasn't ready to hear how the room recovered, how my mother probably laughed it off, how everyone went back to the cake. Natalie paused. Then, carefully, "Okay, but when you're ready, I have something you should see." I felt a chill, not fear, something closer to recognition, like a part of me already knew. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean I have it, all of it, and whenever you want it, it's yours." I didn't ask what it was. Some part of me wasn't ready to hold that kind of power. So I thanked her, hung up, and filed it away in the back of my mind, where it sat for 8 long months, waiting. The first year after the party was the hardest, but not for the reasons you'd think. The pain wasn't the worst part. The silence was. When you stop showing up for a family that never showed up for you, you discover something brutal. Most of those relationships were only alive because you were carrying them. The moment I stopped reaching, the line went dead. No calls on my 31st birthday. Not from my mother, not from my father, not from Brooke. I spent that night in my apartment with a cupcake from the bakery downstairs. A real one this time, with my full name piped in buttercream because I asked for it and paid for it myself. I lit a candle. I sang to myself. And I let myself feel how ridiculous and how freeing that was at the same time. I poured everything into work. I passed my CFA Level 1 that spring. Got promoted to senior analyst by summer. Signed a lease on a new apartment. Small, clean, mine. I hung nothing on the walls for 3 months because I wanted to learn what it felt like to live in a space that wasn't decorated by someone else's expectations. I didn't post anything online. No revenge glow-up. No cryptic quotes about toxic mothers. I just lived. Quietly. Deliberately. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing for an audience that had already decided I didn't matter. The hardest birthday was the first. The second one was lighter. I was starting to understand that the absence of their noise wasn't emptiness. It was space. Space I'd never had. And then, at noon on my 31st birthday, my phone buzzed. One message. Natalie. "Happy birthday, Summer. The whole name. You deserve the whole name." One person remembered. One was enough to start. 8 months after the party, I called Natalie. "Send it to me." She didn't ask if I was sure. She just said, "Check your email." The file was 4 minutes and 22 seconds long. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, cursor hovering over the play button, for almost 15 minutes before I pressed it. The frame was shaky at first. A phone held low, angled upward from the left side of the living room. I could see the drink table, the balloons with Brooke's name, the banner. Then the camera steadied, and I saw myself walk toward my mother. I could hear my voice, quieter than I remembered. "Mom, this party? I thought it was for me?" And then hers, clear as a bell, smiling, unbothered. "Sweetheart, no one would come just for you." I watched my face on the screen. I watched myself look around the room. I watched 47 people avoid my eyes. I watched my father stare out the window. I watched Brooke laugh and turn away, and then I watched myself pick up my purse, walk through the room, and leave. Alone. Not a single person moved, but the camera didn't stop. After I left, my mother turned back to her guests. She smoothed her blouse, picked up her wine glass, and smiled. She's always been sensitive, she told the room, even as a child. A few people chuckled. Someone raised a glass. That's when I cried. Not because of what she said to me. I'd already survived that. I cried because I was seeing myself from the outside for the first time. A woman walking out of a room full of people, completely alone. And no one, not one person in that house, stood up. I closed the laptop, sat in the silence, and something shifted in me that never shifted back. While I was rebuilding my life in silence, my mother was building something too. A story. And in her version, she was still the hero. Natalie kept me updated, not because I asked, but because she thought I should know. Over those 3 years, Diane Parker didn't just move on from what happened at my birthday. She rewrote it. She told relatives I was traveling for work and too busy to visit. She told her friends I was fiercely independent. I raised her that way. She posted old photos of us on Facebook every Mother's Day with captions like, "Missing my girls. A mother's love never fades." Hundreds of likes, heart emojis, comments about what a beautiful family she had. And then, in year 2, she received the Community Mother of the Year award from the local women's league. Natalie sent me a photo of the ceremony, my mother at a podium, clutching a plaque, tears in her eyes, giving a speech about the 2 daughters who taught me what unconditional love means. "Your aunt cried on stage," Natalie texted. Standing ovation. I didn't react. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't send an angry email to the Women's League. I just sat with it. But something clarified that day. My mother hadn't just abandoned me at a birthday party. She'd turned my absence into content. She was using the fact that I wasn't there to prove she was a perfect mother, to the exact same people who sat in silence the night she told me no one would show up for me. I didn't plan what came next. I'm not that person. But when my mother's invitation to the Mother's Day dinner arrived 5 months later, I read it twice, and for the first time in 3 years, I had a reason to go home. 3 years after that birthday. I was 33. Senior financial consultant at a firm I respected. I had my CFA charter. I had an apartment with art on the walls that I chose myself. I had a cat named Oliver and a life that finally felt like it belonged to me. Then the invitation arrived. Cream cardstock, gold embossed lettering, Diane Parker's annual Mother's Day celebration. I knew why she invited me. Not love, logistics. My 3-year absence had started to raise questions. People asked about me at church. Neighbors wondered. "Where's your other daughter, Diane?" She couldn't keep saying I was busy forever. She needed me there. Not for connection, but for credibility. One appearance, one photo, proof that everything was fine. I stared at that invitation for 2 days. Then I called Natalie. "Do you still have the video?" "Always. I need it on a USB drive." She didn't ask why. She didn't hesitate. 2 days later, a small padded envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside, a black USB drive. No label. I spent the next week choosing what to wear, not with vanity, but with intention. I picked a navy blazer, a white silk blouse, hair in a low bun, no statement jewelry, no dramatic transformation. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a professional woman who had built a life without them and wasn't there to perform. The night before the dinner, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. I held the USB drive in my palm. It weighed almost nothing. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was something else. Something I couldn't name until I was standing in my mother's living room the next evening, watching her give the performance of her life. I was ready. The house looked like a magazine spread. White flowers on every surface, candles and glass votives, a slideshow of family photos looping on a laptop in the corner, mostly Diane and Brooke. A few with my father. One of me from 10 years ago, half in shadow. Over 30 guests filled the dining room and spilled into the living room. I recognized most of them. Margaret Wells, president of the Women's League, the one who handed my mother that plaque. Neighbors, friends from Diane's book club, people from her charity committee. These were the people my mother performed for hardest, her real audience. I arrived on time, smiled politely, shook hands, hugged the people who expected hugs, sat at the far end of the table. The USB drive rested in the inside pocket of my blazer. I could feel it against my ribs every time I breathed. After dinner, my mother stood. She tapped her glass with a spoon. The room hushed. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began. Her voice trembled, perfectly calibrated. "Being a mother is the hardest and most beautiful thing I've ever done. I've made sacrifices. I've given up sleep, time, pieces of myself, because that's what love asks of you." She looked at Brooke, then at me. Her eyes glistened. "My 2 daughters are my greatest achievement. Everything I've done, every late night, every worry, every prayer, was for them. And I'd do it all again." Brooke clapped first, then the room joined, a standing ovation. Margaret dabbed her eyes with her napkin. My father nodded from his chair, hands folded. I sat still. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. The applause faded. The room began to settle. I stood up. "Mom, I'd like to say a few words too, if that's okay." My mother beamed. She extended her hand toward me like she was inviting me onto a stage. "Of course, sweetheart. Please." She thought I was going to toast her. I could see it in her eyes. The relief, the satisfaction. Her absent daughter had finally come home to play her role. The picture was complete. I walked to the living room. The TV was mounted above the fireplace, the same one we'd watched movies on when I was a kid. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the USB drive. "I put together something I'd like everyone to see," I said. My voice was steady, conversational, like I was presenting quarterly figures to a client. I plugged the drive in, found the file, pressed play. The screen lit up. Shaky footage, a living room, balloons, a banner that read, "Congratulations, Brooke Parker." My mother's smile wavered. "Oh, is this from the—" Then my voice came through the speakers. "Mom, this party, I thought it was for me?" And then hers, loud, clear, unmistakable. "Sweetheart, no one would come just for you." I didn't watch the screen. I watched the room. Margaret's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. The woman beside her inhaled sharply. 2 men near the window exchanged a look. My father's jaw tightened. The video continued. My mother's face on screen, smiling after I left. She's always been sensitive, even as a child. The low laughter of people who didn't want to be uncomfortable. The clip ended. The screen went black. 8 seconds of silence. I counted them. The longest 8 seconds of my life, and the most honest my mother's living room had ever been. Diane sat frozen. Her face was white. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then finally, a whisper that tried to be a sentence. That was taken out of context. Summer, why would you? I unplugged the USB drive and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I turned to face the room. Not just my mother. Everyone. "I didn't play this to humiliate you, Mom." My voice was calm. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, but standing there, I didn't need the script. The truth was simple enough. "For 3 years, you've told everyone in this room a story. That I'm busy. That I'm independent. That I chose to stay away. I played this so they could hear the real reason." My mother's hands were shaking. "Summer, you're destroying this family." "No, Mom. I'm just done pretending it wasn't already broken." I looked around the room. 30 faces staring at me. Some stunned, some uncomfortable. A few, a very few, looked like they already knew. "I'm not asking anyone to pick a side," I said. "I'm not asking for an apology. I just need the people in this room to know I didn't disappear because I was busy. I disappeared because I was pushed out. And I spent 3 years watching my mother use that disappearance to build an image." I paused. Let it sit. Then I looked at my mother. She was gripping the edge of the table like the floor might tilt. "I love you, Mom. I do. But I will never walk into a room again where I have to make myself smaller so you can feel bigger. That's my boundary, and it's not negotiable." I pulled the USB from my pocket, set it gently on the table. I didn't need it anymore. I nodded to the room, picked up my jacket from the chair, and walked to the door. This time, I didn't look back to see if anyone followed. I didn't need them to. I'd already followed myself out 3 years ago. Tonight, I was just making it official. I need to pause here, because I know this part hit some of you in a place you weren't expecting. If you've ever had to set a boundary with someone you love, even when it broke your heart to say the words, drop boundary in the comments. And if you think what I did was too much or not enough, tell me. I can take it. Now, let me tell you what happened after I walked out that door. I didn't see what happened next. Natalie told me. The moment the front door closed behind me, the room fractured. Not loudly. There was no shouting, no accusations. Just the slow, quiet collapse of a performance 30 years in the making. My mother sat down. Her hands trembled around her wine glass. She tried to recover. She's always been good at recovery. She took that completely out of context, she said, scanning the room for allies. I was joking. You all know how I am. I love both my girls equally. No one agreed. No one nodded. Margaret Wells was the first to move. She stood up slowly, folded her napkin, placed it beside her plate. I think I should be heading home, she said. Her voice was polite but thin. Thank you for dinner, Diane. She didn't wait for a response. She picked up her purse and walked out. Within 15 minutes, 3 more families followed. Each one offered a variation of the same exit. Early morning tomorrow, long drive home, not feeling well. Polite lies to cover the truth. They didn't want to sit in that room anymore. Brooke sat in her chair, eyes red, arms crossed. She didn't speak. Whether she was crying for me or for herself, I'll never know. And my father, quiet, careful, conflict-averse Richard, said something that Natalie told me she'll never forget. He stood in the kitchen doorway, looked at my mother and said, Diane, I told you this would happen. Then he walked into the bedroom and closed the door. My mother sat alone at the head of her beautifully decorated table, surrounded by empty chairs and half-finished plates, in a room that still smelled like the candles she'd lit to impress the people who'd just walked out her door. That night, my phone lit up 7 times with my mother's number. I watched it ring from the couch, Oliver curled in my lap, and I let each call go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. She never does when she doesn't have a script. Brooke texted at 9. We need to talk, Summer. What you did was out of line. I read it. Didn't reply. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being told you went too far by someone who watched you get gutted and said nothing. Then, at 11, a message from my father. Short, no punctuation, like he typed it with one finger in the dark. I'm sorry I was silent for so long. I'm proud of you, Summer. I stared at that text for a long time. It was the first time in my adult life that my father had used the word proud in a sentence about me. I typed back, Thank you, Dad. I'm okay. I set the phone down, leaned back, let out a breath I think I'd been holding for 3 years. I didn't feel victorious. I want to be honest about that. There was no rush of triumph, no fist pump, no tearful relief. I felt tired. Bone-deep tired. Like someone who'd been carrying a suitcase for 30 years and had finally set it down. Not because the journey was over, but because she'd realized the suitcase was never hers to carry. That night, I made 3 decisions. I would see my father separately, on my terms. I would not attend any event my mother organized for public image, and if Diane wanted to talk, really talk, she'd have to come to me. Not through Brooke, not through a text, face to face, with the truth. Those were my boundaries, and I was done negotiating. Consequences don't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes they trickle in like water through a cracked wall, quiet, steady, and impossible to reverse. The week after Mother's Day, Margaret Wells quietly pulled my mother's name from the Mother of the Year nomination for the following year. No public announcement, no confrontation. She simply told the committee, let's consider other candidates this time. My mother found out from a friend and called Margaret directly. Margaret didn't pick up. 3 families from the Women's League stopped inviting Diane to their monthly events. No dramatic exit. They just forgot to send the email. The same way my mother had forgotten to put my name on a cake. Then something I didn't expect. I ran into Mrs. Smith at the grocery store, a neighbor who'd been at both the birthday party and the Mother's Day dinner. She stopped me in the cereal aisle. Her eyes were watery. I didn't know, Summer, she said. I mean, I knew something wasn't right that night at your birthday. We all did. But I sat there and I didn't say anything. I'm sorry. She was one of the 47. I thanked her. I meant it. An apology 3 years late is still an apology. 2 weeks after the dinner, Brooke called. Her voice was different, quieter, less polished. I owe you an apology, she said. I waited. Not just for what Mom said, for what I did. I laughed it off that night. I turned away. I should have walked out with you. Silence on the line. You're right, I said. More silence. I didn't break this family, Brooke. I just stopped holding it together by myself. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. She just said, I know. And I think, for the first time, she actually did. I want to tell you my mother called me the next morning in tears and begged for forgiveness. I want to tell you she showed up at my door with a handwritten letter and a birthday cake with my full name on it. I want to tell you the family healed. I can't, because that's not what happened. 6 months after Mother's Day, my mother called twice. Both times, she opened with the same line. Do you have any idea what you did to me that night? I hung up both times. I wasn't going to argue with someone who watched the evidence and still believed she was the victim. But something changed. Small, almost invisible. Diane stopped posting photos of me online, stopped mentioning me in public speeches, stopped using my absence as a prop. Not because she finally understood what she'd done, but because she was afraid of what else I might have. Fear isn't the same as remorse, but at least it stopped the performance. My father started calling. Every Sunday, 10 minutes. Never long, but always consistent. He never said a bad word about my mother, but he started saying things he'd never said before. How's work going? Are you eating okay? I'm proud of you, kid. Small words, huge for a man who'd spent 60 years avoiding conflict by avoiding connection. Brooke and I met for coffee once. Just once. We sat across from each other at a cafe neither of us had been to, like neutral territory. We didn't solve anything. We didn't hug at the end. But she looked at me, really looked, and said, I'm going to try, Summer. It wasn't a resolution. It was a beginning. And at that point in my life, a beginning was more than I'd had in a long time. I'm 33 now. I live in a different city. My apartment has plants on the windowsill and a cat who thinks he's in charge. His name is Oliver, and he's right. I have friends, real ones. The kind who show up not because they have to, but because they want to. Last month, my coworkers threw me a birthday lunch. There was a cake on the conference table, white icing, blue letters. It read, Happy birthday, Summer. My full name. I stared at it for so long that someone asked if I was okay. I was. I was just remembering what it felt like to have none of that, and realizing how much it meant to have it now. Here's what I learned from those 3 years. A boundary isn't a wall, it's a door. You get to decide who walks through it. You don't need anyone to confirm your worth, but you have every right to walk away from anyone who denies it. And silence is power, but only when you're the one choosing it. When someone else forces your silence, it's not peace, it's a cage. I don't hate my mother. I feel something harder than hate. I feel understanding. I understand that she built her identity around being seen as perfect, and I was the piece that didn't fit the frame. She didn't know how to love me without an audience, and she couldn't admit that, because admitting it would shatter the only version of herself she knew how to be. That doesn't make it okay, but it makes it survivable. My mother taught me what conditional love looks like, and that, more than any promotion or apartment or therapy session, taught me what I will never accept again. That Christmas, my mother hosted dinner at the house, the usual production, white tablecloth, silver candlesticks, the good china. I wasn't there, but I did something I'd never done before. I sent her a card, not through Brooke, not through my father, directly. I wrote it by hand on plain cardstock, slid it into an envelope, and mailed it to the house I grew up in. It said, Merry Christmas, Mom. I hope one day we can sit in the same room and both feel like we belong there. Until then, I'm choosing to belong to myself first. Summer. Natalie told me what happened. My mother read it at the table. She didn't share it with the guests. She didn't cry or make a speech. She folded it, put it back in the envelope, and set it on the counter without a word. But she didn't throw it away. Natalie checked weeks later. The card was on my mother's nightstand, still there in January. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe one day my mother will call me, not to defend herself, but to listen. Maybe she won't. Maybe Brooke and I will find our way to something real. Maybe we'll stay polite strangers who share a last name. But here's what I know for sure. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not standing at the edge of a photo hoping someone will zoom out enough to see me. I'm not holding a cupcake with a single letter on it and calling it enough. I stopped waiting for someone to open the door. I opened it myself. And I walked through. If you're sitting right now in someone else's story, holding a chair for someone who has never once sat down for you, maybe it's time to sit down for yourself. You deserve the whole name on the cake, not just the initial. If my story reminded you of yours, I want you to know, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments, have you set your boundary, or are you still finding the courage? Either way, I see you. If this one moved you, hit subscribe and check the description for more stories like this. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself, because you deserve someone who does, starting with you.